Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended Podcast, and the Blended Pledge. And I'm excited to be diving into supply chain conversations that move the needle for our industry. Now, today I'm joined by 𝙒𝙪𝙜𝙪. He's the CEO of Auctane, which is the parent company of ShipStation. If you've mailed or shipped something in the US, odds are ShipStation has played a role. They're the perfect partner to help us talk e-commerce strategy, especially with the holiday rush right around the corner. Now, even though it's August, in retail and logistics, you know you've got to be months ahead. So yes, a little bit of a trigger warning. We are talking holidays today, because consumers want faster, cheaper, and more transparent shipping, and they favor businesses that rise to that challenge. Now, holiday sales in the US alone hit $973 billion in 2024, according to Statista, setting new records. But in a competitive market with constant disruptions, how can retailers really keep up? Well, feel free to ask any questions throughout the show in the comments, and we will get to those a little bit later. Plus, if you're enjoying the conversation, make sure to drop a fire emoji in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. So we are going to be unpacking so much today, including some insights from Auctane's benchmark report and real-world strategies you can put into place for peak season. So welcome to the show, Al. I'm really excited for this conversation today.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So can you introduce yourself and a little bit about Auctane?
Yeah. So I'm Al. I'm the CEO of Auctane. It's ShipStation's parent company. And as you mentioned, if you've shipped anything, whether it's through ShipStation, we also have API products and also stamps.com. We like to think of ourselves as the magic behind how that item that you ordered online shows up at your doorstep. And our software solutions really simplify the complex shipping and fulfillment backend so that your business can focus on growth. And as you mentioned, this year, we partnered with Retail Economics for our annual benchmark report, where we surveyed 8,000 global shoppers and 400 e-commerce leaders and businesses to figure out what you should be thinking about as we head into the holidays. They're just around the corner.
Yeah, how people are shopping today, how they're thinking about shopping, how they want to be treated as well, I think, too. So we're going to be talking all about that coming up. Now, e-commerce exploded during the pandemic. What did your survey really reveal about what growth looks like right now? Like, I'm so curious about the stats and how it looks like today.
Yeah, the landscape has changed quite a bit in 5 years. And so, first of all, a little bit of context. 84% of e-commerce businesses grew last year. So e-commerce is still growing, but the increase last year was only 5.6%. And I would say everything this year points to maybe around that number, maybe even a little bit less. And compare that to 2020. You mentioned the pandemic, when e-commerce grew by a whopping 44%, when we were all stuck at home with nothing better to do than to buy stuff that we probably didn't need online. And so it's still growing. It's still a huge opportunity, but that monster spike we saw a few years ago, that's mostly a thing of the past. And so the natural question is, instead of chasing that spike, which a lot of people did, and there was some overcapacity and a lot of decisions that you make if you're, doubling your business every couple of years, to really optimizing how you run your business to increase margins so that you can deal with the fluctuations, but in a world where now you're gaining a little share, you're losing a little share, but you're really running your business better. That's actually where our software can come into play, and where we'll be getting into some of the details here.
Well, and that's what people really want, right? They want to optimize their business. They want to increase the margins. And with 84% of businesses growing, those e-commerce businesses, I mean, that's a lot of growth. And we're heading into holiday season and things are about to pick up. I was talking to somebody the other day who drives for Amazon, And he was talking about how they're already talking to the drivers about the ramp up period and what that looks like and what they should be expecting, because this is his first year for holiday. And I turned to him and I said, well, hold on to your horses because it's going to get really busy.
Well, Sarah, it's funny. I think you're a similarly friendly and chatty person as I am. I'm BFFs with my Amazon delivery person, my FedEx person, my UPS person, and the postal delivery person. And of course, the part that we see as consumers is the shopping experience, and then the person who drives the truck or the car show up and drop it off. But behind the scenes, and I'll share one quick anecdote about just optimizing the experience. We have a company we work with. We work with almost 1 million companies, but in Australia called Go for Zero. They're a skincare company, kind of an organic skincare company. And the long and the short of it is, as their volumes grew, rather than the manual process and the Excel pasting and kind of dealing with all that requires then adding more humans, which decreases margins and frankly sometimes gunks up the system, they were able to take the same staff and double the throughput. And if you think about whether that's year over year or just peak season, the capacity to be able to scale up without having to hire all those people, it's very hard to do seasonally, is a critical part of what our software does.
Yeah, I love that name, Go for Zero. And I think when I was doing some research for this particular conversation, is it you that has this analogy? There's no longer the rising tide that lifts all e-commerce boats.
That's right. So again, we shared the stat during the pandemic. The rising tide, you could be selling anything as long as it was online, someone was going to buy it. Now it's different. And now you've got to differentiate. So, the analogy is now you got to be a really good rower. That's not easy, or paddleboarder, or name your analogy. And so really the differentiation, of course, it starts with the product and the customer experience. And that's not the primary focus of today's conversation, but the fulfillment and the logistics to get it there in the time promised, to be able to do that effectively is kind of make or break for a lot of e-commerce businesses.
Well, and that analogy goes kind of for everything, because it's the best rowers with the most efficient operations are going to be the winners. And that's kind of across the board, especially as technology comes in, AI comes in. Those who are not, looking at technology, looking at different ways to do things, optimizing their operations are really going to be sort of left behind in that tide. So let's talk about online versus in-store. Why do you think there's smaller increases? What's happening in consumer behavior right now? And it's interesting because I was talking about this just a little bit earlier today on a podcast episode. So I want to hear your thoughts on this, and then I've got some things that I want to weigh in on.
No, of course. Well, I think it's fair to say we're in a hybrid era, and the pendulum swings a little bit. But right now, in our survey, 54% of shoppers say they're going to do more in-store shopping this year.
Wow.
Compared to only 31% who plan to buy more online. And so again, it's both. They're both growing, but it's about having that omni-channel. And I'll give you an example. Again, we're very familiar with the great retailer Target. Over 80% of their 2023 holiday orders, a couple of years ago, but still very recent, were fulfilled through the stores, pick up, curbside, ship from store. There's a variety of elements. And we talked to other retailers, for example, Best Buy, who actually saw higher foot traffic this year than last year. So there's definitely a dynamic where if you've got the presence, that omni-channel and getting that right can be a huge advantage.
Yeah, one of the things that I was talking to this person about earlier was how their daughter looked at buying products online or even groceries online through maybe like an Instacart or something like that. And I said to him, I was like, well, I would look to do that as well, but then I look at all the fees and I don't really want to pay all the fees. And so then I'm like, well, maybe I can just jump in the car and drive to the store. You know what I mean? It's like the difference of the generations you were talking about, right? The 54%, the 31% online. I think there's a difference in generation there.
And I wonder if your daughter's on your credit card, in which case she doesn't mind the fees, right?
That is such
That's
a
my
good
problem.
point. That is such a good point. I didn't even think about that. But it's really interesting how the different generations and how we're thinking about, because also they mentioned, time is money too, right? So you're paying it in fees, but then how much are you spending in time going to the store and things like that? So it's really interesting how people are thinking about online versus in store, particularly. And I think even with grocery stores and curbside pickup, right? I think there's a pickup in that, or I'm not sure. Have you seen anything on the grocery side?
Yeah, I mean it's another version of buying online and picking up in store. It's a phenomenon, and as long as you can optimize that experience, very often the wait times are less than 5 minutes. And of course, you reference your daughter. Everyone is a little bit different. Back to omni-channel. Some people, we're that family mostly. We like the drop off at our house.
Right.
Other people prefer to pick up at the store for a variety of reasons. They're kind of on their way home and swing by. And others like to pick out that individual apple before they buy it. And I think, again, all these retailers, it's just a more complex world. And beyond the customer experience, we talked about it, the back end fulfillment needs to support these different methods. That's the hard part.
Yeah, and really the blend of the different generations and how they think about and how they want to shop and how do we meet them where they're at.
That's right.
All right, so let's talk about peak season priorities. So with slower growth, how do you think retailers should be preparing for peak? I mean, we're kind of in that right now, aren't we?
That's right. And I have five things we can cover, time permitting. I mean, the first, we touched on this, and this is business 101, profitability over pure growth. So sales are still rising, but margins matter more than ever. And I gave the example a moment ago of Go for Zero, but they were able to reduce their fulfillment time, just the time it takes to get that order in the box and out the door, by 40%. And that enabled next day shipping as opposed to 2-day shipping.
Wow.
Because of the complexity. Again, the synchrony of the software with the people, with the delivery, all working in harmony. And that all drives profitability, which, again, anyone who runs an online business totally understands. But anyone who's a consumer, you don't even think about it. You just have that expectation. That's the difference between a hugely profitable business and one that's kind of struggling to deal with demand, particularly at peak. And we have so many examples of that. The only other thing is we live in a world where everyone is really smart about pricing. And so there's all kinds of dynamic pricing going on. And so the ability to be able to have the insight to know what's going on and to quickly route to whether it's the lowest shipping option or bundling packages or things of that nature, that again, software and analytics turbocharges, that also increases profitability. So
yeah, you need the data. You need to be able to understand not only how they want to buy, whether it's inline or online, pickup in store, or actually going into the bricks and mortar, but then you also want to know what's important to them at checkout, especially online. What are people going for? What matters to them? Is it the sustainability route? What does that look like? And what are the percentages and how do you cater to them specifically?
And give people choice, exactly as
Yeah.
you said. The other four, I'll go a little faster. We talked about omni-channel. That's 2. Delivery experience makes it or breaks it. 60% plus shoppers in our survey, makes total sense. I'm surprised it's not higher. Expect 2-day or less, but actually only a third of retailers can consistently deliver it. So how do you make up that gap of customer expectation versus just what I can afford / what my fulfillment capability can even support?
Yeah. Well, and I want to just bring up an example before you go any further, because I was reading an article today about Kroger, and we're talking about giving the consumer choice. We're talking about delivery options, but also there's a lot of pressure from social media on retailers as well. If they're not delivering and they're not providing that service that people are wanting, there's a ton of backlash, and there's articles being written about their last mile delivery strategy and its reputational risk that they are taking when they're not really making sure that they're doing delivery right. And I was a little bit surprised by it because Kroger was promising a certain amount of delivery. It was taking like 10 to 20 times longer. Bread was being, I don't know, smushed or something like that. And so and it was happening over and over and over again. And so if you don't get this right, you really run a lot of risk, including reputational risk.
That's 100% right. And a stat I read recently, Walmart, for example, which is gaining share, they've invested $9 billion in supply chain upgrades just to close the delivery gap and make the delivery really fast. And so obviously a small business owner is not going to invest that money, but there's a lot of companies that help navigate that so that you can operate like a Walmart. And so it's super important to get that delivery experience right. That was the third point. The fourth, you led off with this. Got to plan early. Holiday shopping starts earlier and earlier. And of course, now with tariffs and supply chain disruptions and all the rest, just being ready and saying, okay, I anticipate this much demand. Can I fulfill it without the hair on fire experience of last holidays?
Right.
I think that's why we're having this conversation today. But plan. And then the final thing, and often an afterthought, and it depends a bit on the industry, returns matter. Some categories have sky high returns, like baby clothes and swimwear.
Mm-hmm.
Other categories, a little bit less, but everyone has returns, and most everyone expects free returns. So how do you make that experience convenient, whether that's drop off, whether it's, no label, and of course, that return being something that's not only easy to do, but ideally something that doesn't cost you, the merchant, the shirt off your back to support that whole experience is an incredibly important thing to get right.
Yeah, going back to what you were saying about holidays starting early, I think I was hearing about Halloween in July. I was like, what is happening? Are we going to be hearing about this in February next year? Because let's just not do that. Because that's going to drive retailers into a complete frenzy. Because also it's about who's the first to market. But don't do it too early. You know what I mean?
Can I tell you a silly story? I'm running a half marathon in 2 Saturdays.
What?
It's Halloween themed. And
already?
So like, oh my gosh, I know it's September 7th is the day. And it's like, okay, so I have my Halloween costume both for the run and afterwards, but I can't believe I had to make the purchase in early August.
What are you going? Can I ask you? What are you going as?
It wasn't my decision. I'm going as Mickey Mouse.
For both, or just that's one out of two outfits?
I don't think I'm going to be buying 2 costumes. I'm just too old to go trick-or-treating. So I'm going to stick with that one for this year. I can send you a picture later.
Yes, send me a picture, or you know what? Post it on LinkedIn, tag me, and we can reference this conversation.
That would be super fun.
I love that. But also what you were talking about, returns really do matter. And I think I was speaking at your virtual conference just a little while ago. And I used an example of a garment that I bought from a large retailer, and they had sent it to me and it didn't fit. And so I literally, messaged them within, I think, 24 hours to say, hey, I need to return this. And it took something like 8 weeks for them to get me a return label. 8 weeks. Like, that is capital sitting on my floor. You don't know where it's sitting in somebody's house, but 8 weeks for that capital to go back onto shelves.
Well, and you're living a proof of, again, in our survey, 70% of shoppers will switch brands if the returns aren't convenient. And so, your own experience, what's the likelihood of you to return to that retailer? Much lower, right? Because it just, you could probably source that same exact item or a very comparable item somewhere else where the experience is much simpler. And again, customer expectations have changed. And so, it's time to get with the times, and there are options available that allow you to fulfill that. And by the way, again, back to profitability and just the efficiency, the staggering rate and volume during the holidays, that alone is enough to kind of gunk up an online retailer's process if you don't think through it and plan right now. So it's both the customer experience and, of course, your ability to manage it in an efficient way.
Yeah, and I will say I did return to them, but I returned to them in store.
There you go. Well,
I
if that's an option, it's nice.
I probably wouldn't buy from them online again. You know?
Nowadays, a lot of retailers, and think about UPS stores. Say there's 16,000 of them that allow returns, and it just depends on, is your merchant connected to a software and a network that then allows you to, I would use the term synthetically scale. You may not have that kind of brick and mortar presence, but there are others that you can connect to that kind of get that back into the stream, ultimately back to your warehouse, and ultimately a happy customer.
Yeah, because I would have wanted to try it on this time, right? Knowing that it didn't fit the first time and having a horrible returns experience. So anyways, just some things to think about. But you've mentioned this a few times. You've mentioned omni-channel strategies a couple of times already through this conversation. So I want to talk about that. One of the questions that I have, and we've talked about the mix and being able to cater to the different people within even one household. Do you think there is a return to bricks and mortar? I mean, you mentioned some percentages earlier. Where do you think we're at on that scale? Because I'm also thinking about a lot of people are craving human connection, right? You think about conferences and things like that. They've been the most attended that they've been since the pandemic. And it's because people are craving that touch and feel and sort of that personalized connection. What do you think? Talk to us about this.
Yeah, I mean, my short answer is, of course, it varies, but having more of an omni-channel presence just helps you cover your bases with the many types of customers that are out there. But I think online-only retailers can be incredibly nimble and creative and drive great outcomes. But we do see, certainly among the larger retailers, that where the store operates as a mini warehouse or as a showroom, kind of a flagship store, or if you have multiple locations, and this is whether you are a large company like a Best Buy or a Target, or even where you're a small company where you can work with third-party logistics companies, you have your inventory in multiple spots. That way you can pool across the two, you limit overselling, you kind of are closer to the customer to get that delivery there fast but efficiently. And then I'd call out partnerships, especially for the online only and smaller retailers, that there are many, many examples of brick and mortar partnering with online to enable a better experience. And it's better for the brick and mortar. It's more foot traffic for them, but it's better for the online because it allows for, and it depends on the use case, the in-person return or the various items that are handled a little bit better in person. And so you see a lot more of these partnerships. And I think what you're going to find, and it's a big focus of our investment, even in our software, is if you don't have the wherewithal to figure that out yourself, a lot of the software platforms, including ShipStation, have those connections ready to go. And so as you scale and as your needs evolve and as your customer demands, you can kind of flex to offer those options.
Well, and organizations are doing it in creative ways, right? We've seen pop-ups where companies are doing pop-ups in certain locations after they've done the research and they know that their customer base is there. I've also seen the example with Amazon, I think, and Kohl's, right? Where Kohl's, you can go into a Kohl's store and you can take your Amazon package and be able to return it quite easily. Are there any other examples like that you've sort of seen?
Yes. Certainly there are the pop-ups, but there's a lot of partnerships. For example, Shein, the big, online retailer, they teamed up with Forever 21 to offer US in-store pickup. So, in this case, it's not a pop-up analogy, but utilize someone's physical footprint to be able to support a very different business and business model. And that bridges the digital and the physical.
Yeah.
And we have many other examples like that I think are really interesting, and it's a classic win-win.
Yeah, and you mentioned mini warehouses. I was actually talking on my live show yesterday morning about micro factories as well. So it's really interesting where we can talk about pop-ups, we can talk about mini warehouses, we can also talk about micro factories as well. People are thinking in sort of a micro fashion instead of a macro fashion like we have been in supply chain traditionally. Now I want to give a shout out to Noreen. We've got Riddy and Gabriella all in the comments. Thank you for your questions. Now we're going to answer those questions in just a little bit, so hang tight. And if anybody else has any questions or you're loving the conversation, I want to see some fire emojis in the comments. All right, let's get to social comments or social commerce. Now your report shows 74% of Gen Z and 64% of millennials plan to shop via social platforms. I mean, are the retailers ready for this? Because I'm not sure they are.
Honestly, most are not. So just a couple of stats. And again, these update all the time, but TikTok Shop is over a $10 billion business, and it's only growing, and it's gonna, people expect that number to be, closer to 30 billion next year. So it's exploding. And there's brands like Sephora and Gymshark that are thriving inside of TikTok Shop, but most aren't set up for in-app checkout. So the reality is that the divide is very, very real between those who support a TikTok or an Instagram sales. And we're not just talking about advertising here. We're talking about full all the way to purchase. But our survey suggests that almost half of retailers are kind of lagging in that department. And so you're missing out on an enormous growth channel, and the tools are there for you to take advantage if you're savvy about it and you know who your customers are.
Well, and it's really about, and I think it's all about sort of authentic content, community-driven shopping. There's a lot of influence that happens on social media platforms that really drives those sales.
That's right. You referenced your daughter, but I have three teenagers, a girl and two boys. And one thing that I notice relative to my own childhood in Los Angeles, I live in the Bay Area now, is all the kids seem to dress the same. And it's influenced by social media, and it's incredible. I turn around and one day everyone's wearing Crocs. And then 6 months later, everyone seems to, at least in my neighborhood, have switched to the Birkenstock Bostons. Not just any Birkenstock, the covered shoe. It's almost like the Croc of Birkenstocks, but it's literally, to me, it feels like one day to the next, literally everybody is wearing something different. And so I've read about this phenomenon. I think there is a little bit more like herd mentality going on, but it's because of the enormous power of social media that when one person sees it, probably tens of millions have, and people flock to that. And it's just the world today.
Well, take Taylor Swift's engagement. I mean, it just happened yesterday, but we haven't talked about it.
We need an hour just to talk about it. I can barely process what happened.
Well, it's interesting because I posted about the logistics behind all of that. And somebody wrote in the comments about the logistics of the wedding for all the brands that are going to be sort of featured and mentioned, and they're going to have a rush of people buying from them because of the influence and because of the social media platforms. I mean, I read that and I was like, wow, I didn't even think about that, but it's so true.
Well, as both an NFL fan and as a Swiftie, I've been to 3 concerts. What? It is hard to process, but I saw on my social media feed yesterday, because it's all the frenzy that you reference has already begun. I saw a breakdown of what they were wearing, from the watch, to the dress, to the jewelry, to the this, every single thing, and what it was, and where you can buy it.
Wow.
And I suspect we've only just begun.
Well, and I just want to pause there because at the end of the day, those retailers that are not ready for this, we talked about this, right? A couple of questions ago. If those retailers aren't partnered with the right technology providers, the right vendors, the right partners to be able to help them with a rush like this, and you never know when it's going to happen necessarily, or get them connected to social media platforms, and make sure that they are where the consumers are buying. I mean, if you're not rowing, what are you doing?
And connecting a couple of themes we talked about: one, preparation, and number two, the online rush. The artificial holiday rush could be if you happen to be discovered on a social media channel, kind of overnight, you can 10x, 100x. Are you ready for that? And again, being on the right solutions, being prepared to be able to scale is the difference between capitalizing on that moment and not. And I think the 𝙒𝙭 wedding will be a great use case for probably a handful of very lucky brands who are able to just capitalize in the moment. It's a crazy thing. I can't even believe it.
Well, and they already are, like you said, just on the engagement photo. All right, let's move on from that. I want to talk about marketplaces. I want to talk about marketplaces, right? Because we're talking about direct to consumer with retailers and things like that. But what about marketplaces? Where do they sort of fit in all of this?
Oh, they're massive. So first of all, 63% of all global commerce actually flows through marketplaces. Wow. And our report showed that fully half of our consumers expect to shop more on marketplaces. And these are places like everything from Etsy to eBay to Amazon. All of these are marketplaces, and the beauty and the reason they're so strong is it actually enables smaller brands to give them instant reach to tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of customers, often with either built-in logistics from the marketplace themselves, or and this is where, again, our solutions and ShipStation plays to allow you to be able to connect to the marketplace, but then handle kind of the surges in volume. And so they really allow SMBs to reach larger audiences, while the larger audiences have much more variety and choice.
Yeah. There's kind of, pros and cons to everything. But 63% is a really, really big number. And the 48% of consumers that plan to shop more often on marketplaces, you kind of have to be everything to everyone all the time.
That's right.
That's what I'm hearing, which is hard, right? It's very overwhelming for retailers and especially supply chain teams. But I think, and I've mentioned this before, and I talk about AI all the time, and you might be like, oh, AI, here it is again. But we have to keep talking about it because I don't think it's going anywhere. So where does AI fit into some of this peak readiness that we're talking about? What does that look like?
Oh my gosh, in so many ways, and you didn't hear it from me first, but it's going to change your life and more and more and more. And if you haven't already embraced it, whether as a consumer and certainly as a business person trying to reach consumers, the time is long overdue. Retailers that embrace AI logistics, they saw a 3x higher online sales growth. That's in our report, and you can read more. A lot of fascinating detail about that. I'd say inside a ShipStation, again, our flagship software, AI already supports carrier selection, route optimization, powers data-driven insights like inventory management, returns, in so many ways that allows a seller who's using the software to optimize decisions to, again, ultimately fulfill more orders more efficiently. Because at the end of the day, it's about a happy customer, from order all the way to it's at their doorstep, and then sometimes a return or an exchange. And we have so many examples out in industry. For example, Zara, the great Spanish retailer, their AI-driven demand forecasting model reduces unsold inventory. And you talk about mini factories and mini warehouses, that just reduces the need for all this excess stock, that allows you to go mini, that allows you to be local, that allows you to serve the customer better. As an example, AI chatbots handle surges in customer service. Again, back to preparing for the holidays. That's when you're busiest is when you're being called the most. So right. How do you handle that? Hyper personalization, right? And I do think I just got one silly story for you. Being a Korean American guy, growing up in the United States, I'm used to seeing ads where people don't look like me, and that's okay. I'm just used to it. Now, half the ads, it's of a much handsomer Korean than me, some kind of K-pop model looking guy wearing the thing that is being sold to me online, right? I suspect across more than just the N of one of me, that improves conversion, right? Because now you can hyper target to who that is and what they might look like. Just to use another example of where these are AI-driven tools that allow people to just create many more permutations of the same thing. And that's just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, well, and in your Zara model, it also helps to reduce waste. If you're reducing that unsold inventory by 20%, you are reducing waste as well, which everybody wants to hear also. But when you implement AI to help with all of this, you also need to make sure that your sales keep up. And so I'm glad that we talked about, marketplaces and where retailers need to be, because, you need your sales to keep up to be able to, run with what AI is doing and how it's optimizing your business. But another example of hyper personalization, and we mentioned this on my live show yesterday morning, and I think it's in the Nike store in Dubai. I've seen it somewhere else as well, but they are customizing Nike shoes for you while you wait within the store. So you talk about hyper personalization within ads and different things like that, but also how do we hyper personalize the experience and the buying experience and how they're buying from us and where they're buying from us. And that's an in-store example where you can get customized Nikes. And I love that. I need to go there.
I hadn't heard of that, but probably worth the flight.
Right? I know. I've done it online. So I have some Let's Talk Supply Chain custom Nike Air Force ones, but they don't have the same colors anymore. So I may have to fly out there. All right. So let's talk about premium delivery. We've talked about costs. What are the opportunities like with premium delivery? Are people going to pay for that? Are they going to pay extra for that? What does that look like?
Yeah, and a lot of people assume that you have to only offer free delivery. But again, in our survey, and there are many other examples out in the world that reinforce this, 55% of consumers are willing to pay extra for same day or next day. And among frequent shoppers, which is your most valuable customer, that number jumps to 72% of the time. Wow. People are willing to pay extra. Of course, it depends on the circumstance, but if you really need something, whether it's because you're trying to meet a deadline because you procrastinated or otherwise, it's there. And I'll give a fun example of, again, multiple companies partnering, but at Macy's, they had a pilot with DoorDash, not to order food, but to have those Dashers deliver Macy's products. That the speed of a DoorDash, that I could buy it and literally a Dasher would go to the Macy's and drop it off at your house same day, boosted the basket size of that Macy's order by 23% over a normal order. This is a great scale. So customers want to pay for it. It wasn't free, right? They'll pay for it. They just need the right, they need the means of delivering that, be that with DoorDash or someone else. But also, two, of course, there's so many other factors at play in enabling that type of experience that folks need to be prepared for.
Well, and think about the 23% to your bottom line. Doesn't everybody want that? I mean, that is a great number. But I also go back to my example around my daughter looking to pay the fees to be able to get the groceries delivered rather than jumping in the car and going to the store. People will pay for it if they can have almost that instant gratification or have it when they need it, right? It's the same with Uber Eats. There's a lot of people that will buy their food on Uber Eats and pay all the fees so that they don't have to get in their cars and go and get it. And so it's really that convenience factor. And I think it's proven over and over again that people will pay for it.
My son would rather get a $20 Chipotle burrito delivered to our home than go to Chipotle and pay $12.
Okay, so I think this is also a generational thing too, because my husband and I debate this all the time. Do we Uber Eats or do we go get it? And he's always like, it's going to be cold. He does not like cold food. And so our challenge with that all the time is that we usually end up getting in the car because he doesn't want to pay the fees and have cold food.
He's my kind of guy. I'm a go pick up at store kind of guy myself.
I love that. All right, let's go back to returns. You talked a little bit about how important they are a little bit early on. We talked about that example that I had with that retailer, and it's sitting on my floor for 8 weeks. How important are returns, especially for younger consumers, which we're talking about right now?
What's interesting is there's a pretty big divide. So boomers, and I'm kind of in between, but I'm closer to boomer than Gen Z. They are pretty satisfied with their returns, 70% in our survey. And I have to say, I'm one of those. I'm pretty satisfied with the returns process that are available to me. And I actually don't like to return that many items. So I probably screen more up front to make sure that, if it's pants, I buy them in store. If it's something that's a sweatshirt, I'll buy that online because it could be a little big, could be a little tight. That's okay, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas Gen Z, because they purchase more online, because it's more impulse, because it's more socially driven, they've got a higher rate of returns. And not surprisingly, their satisfaction with returns is less than half, 31%. And so getting this right, and that only 31% are satisfied. So in other words, 69 are dissatisfied, coupled with the fact that 62% of shoppers under 35 would switch brands if the returns are inconvenient, is a major yellow light, perhaps a red light. If your business caters to Gen Z, you have to get it right.
Yeah, I would aim towards the red light at 62%. Yeah. If it was 48, maybe that's yellow, but 62% is a really high number, and it's going to cost you so much money to get that consumer back if they come back.
That's right.
And that's such a big investment. All right. We've got one more question around technology and returns. So if you have any questions for Al, make sure to put them in the comments because we are going to get to those next. And remember, we've put in the comments the link to this benchmark report, and we'd love for you to get your own copy so that you can have access to some of the things that we're talking about today. So head over there, download that, and put your comments or your questions in the comments, and we'll get to those in just a minute. So tech and returns, how do you think technology can balance seamless returns and cost? Because cost is a big factor when organizations, retailers are looking at returns and how they manage it. And I'm going to give you a quick example. So Knix is a brand of garments. And I read, I think it was on an Instagram post, that this woman wanted to return what she had bought because they didn't fit. And they actually replied to her and said, we'll send you a new pair. We're going to donate, or why don't you take that and donate that pair to somebody else that needs it?
I love that example. And again, it varies by category and by sophistication of retailer. But the one dirty little secret of returns is a lot of the returned items end up in a landfill because it's hard to sell back as new, and the cost to repackage it, restock it, whatever, is often not worth the value of the item itself. Now, of course, it varies by item. And so I think it's a win, both for the environment, for society, that someone gets a brand new pair of clothes that didn't happen to fit the buyer. And it's probably a great customer experience and one that increases your affinity in that retailer. I think that's really smart. And of course, every retailer needs to crunch the math a little bit and to kind of figure that out. But, to your question about returns, should both be something that you optimize to manage the bottom line, as well as, in your example, to be a growth lever to delight the customer that then ultimately generates more sales. And, what we talked about with technology and with AI, but there's just AI automation to enable instant returns and exchanges. There is the predictive restocking to cut costs. There are tools to reduce returns up front that allow people to try on the clothes virtually, that make sure that it's a better match. Just yesterday, I wouldn't even call this AI. This is just basic stuff. I had to answer a list of questions: my height, my weight, my age, which impacts body shape, and then they had a virtual body, and I had to slide chest, waist, etc. so that then it recommended me the exact size.
Wow.
And so, things like that, it's a little bit more upfront, but if that is a more satisfied customer and lower returns, probably easily worth it. And then, of course, the return problem itself, you referenced your experience with 8 weeks to get the label going. Is the label already in there? Better yet, a label-free and even box-free drop-off at a convenient location. All of these things can reduce the cost and the friction. And ultimately, then that becomes a growth lever.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I think we're going to get to audience questions right now. And I do have one from Kyle. You're already talking about AI. So I think we're going to ask their question first. So what are the best AI tools to implement?
Well, I don't know too much about Kyle's business. I would say I'm going to give a chalky answer here and say ShipStation. If you're an online seller, we're powered by AI, and it does a lot of optimization. So I'm going to say ShipStation, but it depends. And I would just tell all users or all listeners, you should try out different tools. They are incredible and more powerful than you imagine. There is a little trial and error, but you will never get it right if you don't try them. It is your friend, and it is an incredible productivity booster. And if you're an online seller and you don't use ShipStation, I would start there.
Yeah. And I think you're right. I think I was talking to somebody earlier that we do need to give more opportunity for teams to be able to try different technologies to see what's going to work and what's not. And really, that's the only way that you're going to figure out what's right for you. Right?
Correct.
All right. So Gabriella, and then I'm going to go over to my personal LinkedIn. What are the best ways to manage customer expectations around shipping times?
Yeah. First of all, you got to deliver on your promise. If it's 5-day, 2-day, same day, you got to deliver on that. I would say it starts there, but also getting the notifications right. And this is the hard part of half the battle is the uncertainty of when is this thing going to arrive. And so giving them, and again, AI can help with this, tighter time windows. And, very often we hear a lot of escalations where I need it dropped off between 5 to 8 p.m. because I'm not home before that, or, that kind of thing. Getting that right is, again, the difference between world-class and merely putting the box in this delivery stream and then hoping for the best. And I would say the same for returns, right? Half the question once I return it is, it's not like you get an instant credit typically. You're wondering, when have they processed this thing? What is the status? And the better you can be about that. And it starts with you, the retailer, knowing, which half the time they do not. And then, of course, being able to proactively engage with the customer. That is the best way to manage customer expectations.
Yeah, if a customer has to try to remember that they're waiting for a refund, that is the worst. Because half the time you don't remember. So it would be nice to get notified when that's going to be processed. And I haven't seen that actually happen too often.
That's right. Yeah, I have a silly story. I do a fair amount of online shopping, but I'm a big soccer fan as well as football and being a Swiftie. And I ordered
so much about you today, Al.
I ordered a new soccer jersey like 3 weeks ago. I recognize there's some record demand for this one specific LAFC jersey, but it's not only still not here, but I have no estimate of when it's going to arrive, and it's super annoying because I've actually paid the money, and I knew it wouldn't be immediate. So this is not a case of missing a 1-day or 2-day expectation, but just let me know.
Right.
Where is it? Still in the factory? Has it not even been made? Just so I can manage my own expectations as opposed to refreshing my email or the order tracking that just says nothing and then asking me to figure it out or just be patient. That's not the world we live in anymore.
No. And most of them don't even have call centers. So it's not like you can call them up and be like, hey, have you heard of ShipStation? I'm just kidding. The other thing I think, to Gabrielle's point, is data. right? Knowing what your consumers want. Do they want same day? Do they want next day? Do they want an option that is eco-friendly? Like I picked the eco-friendly option for Amazon, which I'm kind of regretting because I was hoping to have it this morning and it's still not here and I'm not entirely sure where it is. And I'm sure I could track it if I went on the app, but I haven't had time for that today.
Sure.
But the data around what do your customers want? What choices do they want? I think that really, you need to take that into consideration as well.
I love what you're saying. There's the data to know what the available options are that the merchant needs to have. There's the data you provide to the user, but I think the real interesting point you're making is then to communicate those choices with the user. Because Sarah, I bet more often than not just because you're that kind of person and love the environment, you would be willing to have it a day later if you knew that maybe the truck could run and make one run through your neighborhood rather than two and burn all that gas and all of that for you. And of course, even the delivery company would rather make that one run. It's more efficient for them. And there can be a win-win there if we get the data right. And you're starting to see, and again, these AI tools help, more and more sophistication around there. And again, back to, if you're a smaller business, are you kind of injecting yourself into that stream of sophistication, or are you just doing it the old way? I think those are the questions everyone needs to ask.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's get to Noreen, and then we've got Riddy, and then I have one more question for you. So Noreen says, great session. I'd love to hear more about the strategies that have proven most effective in improving adaptability during peak season.
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say three things. First, selling on multiple channels. So we talked about social. We talked about marketplaces. You can also have your own store. A lot of people do, and it's easier than ever to get one set up. That way, you kind of cover your bases as opposed to there is the one way that I sell, and that just maximizes customer reach. Number two is, and again, I'll toot our own horn with the software. Does the software and does your process that's built around the software allow you to scale up and scale down? That should you have the good fortune of having a gusher of holiday orders, or your item happened to be selected by Taylor Swift to wear in a post seen by billions, that you're able to capture that demand, which is easier said than done. But do you have a process that supports that? And then the final mile, because costs vary, because customer expectations vary, and you can control some of that with the options that you provide. Do you have a lot of choice that's available to you, as opposed to working with that one vendor, that one carrier, so that you can have the flexible options you need to fulfill the customer need? Those are the three areas that I would focus on.
Awesome. Great question. Great answers. Okay. One more question, Riddy. The question is, are there significant differences in bottom line? So I think e-commerce stores that offer free pickup from doorstep for returns versus retailers that only offer free drop off to couriers or pickup from door. Are there significant differences in their bottom lines because they give customers the flexibility for that easier return process?
It's a great question. I don't know that I have a very specific answer, because the reality is revenue minus cost equals whatever flows down to the bottom line. There are so many factors at play: your labor costs, the union that works for your company, all of those things. And then, of course, the type of industry you're in. The answer is it varies. Of course, the more options you give, often that's associated with more cost. But that cost, if managed effectively, and if that cost then translates into more sales, which then you can amortize the cost base over a much larger revenue pile, that's what's going to drive the bottom line. So we can give all kinds of examples of pure plays and multimodal type companies, and you're going to see different outcomes. It comes down to execution and good management.
Awesome. Well, such great questions from the audience. Now, I have one final question for you, Al. What are your top 3 must-dos for retailers before the holiday rush? I love a good action item ending.
Yeah. So first of all, I'll end where we started, which is I would protect and grow margins over just trying to chase growth headlong. Of course, it depends on the type of company, but I would optimize your operations. Number two, you have to meet shoppers where they are, online, in-store, social, marketplaces. It's a big part of our conversation today, but kind of the seamless blend of those channels will consistently win. And then very importantly, nail the post-purchase. Fast, flexible delivery, easy returns, notifications. This is how you keep holiday shoppers coming back all year.
I love that. Such great takeaways. And remember, we've got that benchmark report in the comments. So go and download that today so you can get all of the insights. We've only shared, I think, a few of those insights today. But I think that's a perfect way to end. Al, thank you so much for your insights. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. And don't get caught off guard by this holiday season, right? If you don't want to get caught off guard, visit ShipStation.com for more resources, and let's make peak season a success in 2025. Al, thank you so much for joining.